Welcome back to Reimagining Cyber. My name is Ben, and today we're reflecting on a story that read like a Hollywood plot, a ransomware attack that forced the city of St. Paul, Minnesota into a state of emergency and even brought in the National Guard. With me is our resident cybersecurity expert, Tyler Moffitt. How are you doing, Tyler?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on, Ben.
Marvellous. Now, tell me, what makes this incident stand out? You've been following it closely.
Yeah, Ben, this is definitely different than just standard corporate breach, right? This was a whole city brought to a standstill. You talk about public Wi-Fi down, bill payment systems offline, library systems locked. It escalated to the point where the mayor had to declare a state of emergency, right? And then, the National Guard called in for... that's so crazy. You don't normally see that for, a run-of-the-mill everyday cyber attack.
Yeah, indeed. So walk us through the timeline. What exactly happened?
Sure, yeah. The city first detected the ransomware attack on July 25th. And at first they thought it was contained, sort of generic attack. They thought that, they had contained it, but it quickly spread across multiple departments. And by 3-4 days later, July 29th, it was clear, not business as usual. And, Mayor Melvin Carter declared a state of emergency. And that's literally when the Minnesota National Guard cyber unit was mobilized. They called it the Operation Secure St. Paul. And it's a joint response, not only with the Guard, but the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security. So basically everybody brought in. And really how, it's very fast, how it escalated. So within 4 days, you go from something weird's going on with IT to National Guard boots on the ground, which really showcases how disruptive ransomware can be.
And the attackers? Who is behind it?
So the ransomware group that took responsibility are called Interlock. They're not really a big name. If you haven't heard of them, that's probably normal because, they're relatively new. They're not like Lockbit or, Black Cat or any other of the big ones we've talked about before. But they do operate under the same ransomware as a service model where the group operators, they don't actually conduct any of the attacks. They just sort of run the infrastructure behind it, whether it's the command and control servers, the leak site, the payment portals, everything you would need to conduct the attack, but they're not pulling off the attack. That's where they have affiliates. They bring affiliates in. And the affiliates are the ones that actually do all the risk of conducting the attack, right? And then the profits are usually split 70 to 80% goes to the affiliate and 20 to 30% go to the operators. And that's been under some change too recently. Now that the affiliates get more, and that's because of a ransomware group called Ransom Hub that last year sort of pioneered giving more to the affiliates to attract more affiliates from other ransomware groups. And now they all are doing that and giving, a huge cut to the affiliates. So for St. Paul, Interlock claimed that they stole 43 gigabytes of data, so...
Which doesn't sound like a huge amount, but I guess...
No, but it's enough sensitive data. Again, it's all about the targeting of...
What you get, isn't it?
Yeah. So employee records, financial documents, resident services data that cause trouble, anything that would be PII and violate, CCPA, GDPR, all those data privacy governing laws, right? And posted them on their leak site to prove that, they were serious.
What's the situation like ransom-wise then?
Yeah, so the city confirmed they're not paying, and that's consistent with the FBI guidance. It's a tough call. Not paying means your data is out there, but, paying doesn't always guarantee you get your systems back either.
What did this mean for people actually living in St. Paul?
Right. So talk about residents. They definitely felt it, right? If the online payment portals are shut, people can't pay for utilities, parking tickets, permits, or all the other things that are required from, city services and infrastructure. The city Wi-Fi went down. Library systems basically went back to pen and paper. Even staff communication slowed because, like everything, email systems, file systems, they're all restricted and shut down or offline. And, it's not like the water stopped running or police radios didn't work, but the digital nervous system of the city was effectively paralyzed.
Let's talk then about the National Guard, the cyber soldiers, if you like, coming in a ransomware crisis. What exactly did they do?
Yeah, so that's a good question. The Guard has specialized cyber protection teams. Their role isn't, kick the doors down. It's digital triage, right? So they help St. Paul with things like mass password resets, right? Like tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of accounts, forensic analysis of compromised servers, network segmentation, right? So make sure to contain the attacker so they can't move laterally further. That's what they're all about. As soon as they get in and gain a foothold, is moving to as many systems as possible to get his control of his, much different types of data and systems that they can push their malware to, the ultimate ransomware. And then backup validation to make sure that, clean data is available for people to use. So think of it like a disaster recovery, but like with a military chain of command. The guard brings like discipline and, surge capacity when like the local IT is absolutely overwhelmed.
So the guard, if you like, were basically IT reinforcements then?
Absolutely. And structure, the IDP departments of municipalities, and we have a history here. Like they have been attacked and shut down with ransomware for years now, like going on almost 10 years. They're a popular target because they have a lot of computers, but not a lot of IT staff, right? They are very small, maybe like a dozen people for an entire city. And you throw ransomware at them, they're basically drowning. Calling the Guardians like calling the cavalry.
If you look back over the last few years, there were attacks in Atlanta and Baltimore as well. How does St. Paul compare to those cases?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that government municipalities have been targeted before. Atlanta and Baltimore were big ones, also Dallas. There are tons out there. But if you guys remember Sam ransomware, that was Atlanta, 2018. They refused to pay a $51,000 ransom. Obviously, things have changed now. They're no longer asking $51,000. But that's no to $51,000 ended up costing over $17 million to the city of Atlanta. And then Robinhood ransomware, they hit Baltimore the year afterwards, right? Recovery costs were $18 million in weeks of disruption. And then Dallas, 2023, not police dispatch offline. That took months to fully recover. And, this St. Paul is like the same pattern in disruption. Ransom refused, costly and complex recovery. And one thing I just want to mention, this is just with my knowledge about the systems. I don't know too much about the initial attack vector with St. Paul because those details are about to come out. But Atlanta, Baltimore, and Dallas, all three of those were compromised remote desktop. So specifically Atlanta and Baltimore, they had open remote desktop protocol, port 3389. Just everybody's used remote desktop. It's super convenient. And it's, built into Windows and you turn it on. But if you turn it on by default, you're allowed unlimited number of login attempts. No alert sent, no lockout, no nothing. And so essentially like they're able to brute force and get their way in through essentially the back door being left wide open. And so I hope that's not the case here, but that has been the story with government municipalities and their small IT infrastructure getting owned. So definitely something to watch out for.
What's in it for the attackers then? How much money are we talking about here?
Well, obviously it is the most amount of money that cyber criminals can make when they have a breach or they've compromised a system or environment. Making ransomware is their go-to play for monetization. Just chain analysis. Chain analysis is they watch cryptocurrency payment for illicit activity and they work with the government and stuff. And they had a report saying like over $1 billion, 1.1 billion of ransoms paid last year, right? And so pretty crazy how much money they can make, right? And the largest ransom we've ever seen paid was Dark Angels, hit a Fortune 50 company. Now, we don't know which company it was because they paid good money for us not to know. And they made $70 million in one ransom. So, yeah, this is big business. Obviously, it's the number one choice to have. And like I said, cities, like municipalities, they're rich enough to have a money, like balance sheets showing lots of money for them to, throw money at. Poor enough in defenses to be vulnerable. And, politically sensitive, so the pressure to pay is high. There are definitely, Fulton County, Georgia, was suspected to pay last year a ransom because of political documents related to the Trump case being stolen, and they paid that ransom, allegedly. And so we don't have any more details about it because that's why you pay. But, it's definitely makes sense for them to go and fish in this pond, right? Government municipalities. A lot of systems to maintain, not a lot of IT staff, yet they have, a balance in the budget, if that makes sense.
Okay, then let's turn to lessons then. What should cities, businesses, and even individuals, I guess, take away from St. Paul?
Yeah, definitely. There's some good things to cover here. Investing in modern defenses, like many cities run on outdated IT, making them, sitting ducks, like basic hygiene, like patching and multi-factor authentication, or like number of failed login attempts leading to a lockout. Like I'm telling you, remote desktop compromise is how they've embarrassed so many other government municipalities. And I'm curious to know if this was the way this happened as well. And it would just be really unfortunate if that is, because that's really caught many municipalities with their pants down many times. Next would be incident response partnerships. So St. Paul was lucky that they could call the Guard and FBI quickly and build those relationships, before it's full-fledged crisis. Backups, really big, right? Offline tested backups are your lifeline. Make sure they're immutable, meaning that if ransomware were to come in and see that you have backups being saved, a lot of them will try and corrupt those backups, or basically encrypt the backup and then have that uploaded to the backup as your snapshot is the actual encrypted one. So if you tried to then download your backed up stuff, it would be encrypted. If you have immutable, that's impossible. You just go to history snapshots and go to the one before any attack, and that can't be touched or modified or changed or encrypted, and you have that back. And then also communication. So St. Paul was pretty transparent with residents, and that helps rebuild trust, even when the data exposure was very uncertain and everybody thought everything was up in the air and they had it all, right? And I finish this off, thinking globally. Municipal attacks are local, but the tactics and the infrastructure, the ransomware as a service, data leaks, double extortion, these are the same tactics that hit global enterprises, right? And even at the individual level, this isn't, obviously all those recommendations were for the city, but just for individuals, use strong, unique passwords. I recommend using spaces, like a phrase if you want, like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs with spaces is super long and super complex, right? As far as if you're considering hash busting or password cracking, which is how a lot of these go through, and password cracks with using GPUs, and enable multi-factor authentication wherever you can, right? I like to use the authenticator codes, like in the Authenticator app. But even if you're just using the text SMS, which you can spoof, and that can be easily stolen by someone committing identity fraud, to AT&T or whoever you have for your service and getting the SIM swapped. But it's still exponentially more safe than just having only password. And then always, keep an eye, credit monitoring, if you live in an infected city, in case any of your credentials were stolen, like, your information, your address, your social security, all the things that would be needed to open out a loan in your name. That stuff can come as a surprise, so always keep a check on that.
Good stuff. So, final thoughts then, Tyler.
Yeah, absolutely. So this St. Paul attack shows ransomware is not just a corporation problem, it's a societal one, right? Cities, municipalities, they call the National Guard because hackers, took over and encrypted their systems. And you realize how fragile, essentially, the environment can be. It's also a preview of what's ahead. Ransomware is not going away. It does look to be like, you just look at the average ransom amount going up and up and up. The numbers keep going up for the criminals. And the groups evolve. They get shut down. They rebrand. They come back. They bounce back. And they keep hitting the next soft target. Okay? So you just want to make sure, you're not a soft target, and you do your best not to be. The question is whether we as defenders can evolve faster.
Indeed, great perspective. Thanks, Tyler.
Thanks for having me on, Ben.
And thanks to you for joining us on Reimagining Cyber. Do stay tuned for more stories. And the best way to do that is to subscribe or follow wherever you're listening to us right now. We'll be back next Wednesday. Goodbye.